reduction went from 30% to 70% seizure reduction. I've been a physician now for 24 years. I made the change from pediatric ER to cannabis practice because I knew someone who was using medical cannabis who was sick. And seeing her do so well with this, I thought, wow, here I am a doctor and I don't even have an opinion because I don't know. So that's kind of where then I started that quest for knowledge to make myself a person who understands this and then can help other people understand it. Good morning, everybody, and thank you for getting up early to come here and hear me speak. I have seen things that we can call miracles, and I think it's really important to understand that to a family that's suffering, it feels like a miracle, but it's really just science, and there's no reason to be afraid of it, and there's no reason that this is not an option for everyone. In 1988, researchers discovered living things, humans, have cannabinoid receptors in their brains.
Most people are familiar with dopamine, serotonin, norepinephrine, classical neurotransmitters. Neurotransmitters are chemicals that allow neurons to talk to each other. When neuron A talks to neuron B, it sends a chemical messenger across the synapse, and that binds to receptors at neuron B, and then that turns into electricity.
What we've discovered is that there's a part of that system is governed by cannabinoid compounds. These are just molecules that we have that bind to these specific receptors, and they seem to play a role in smoothing out the whole communication process.
It seems to be so important that a group at NIH recently published a review and said that the endocannabinoid system is involved in essentially all human diseases. Now that's a very strong statement. Very strong.
Those receptors are not there for the cannabis plant, but it turns out that the cannabis plant compounds called cannabinoids work at those receptors.
So when you take a cannabinoid in from outside by smoking or vaporizing or eating or a pharmaceutical, you are somehow tinkering with that system and adjusting the way in which those nerves and muscles and communications happen.
I often joke around with my patients, it's not magic fairy dust, it's not voodoo. There are chemical compounds in the plant that interact with the cells in our brains and in our bodies and have certain reactions. It's the same as every other drug. It's just came from a plant.
I, as an herbalist, felt duped, felt lied to. As I tell people about magnificent herbs all the time, cannabis was just off limits. I mean, I was in that culture of it. I thought it was this poisonous weed. I have 9 children, and I have seen a lot of people with cancer. These experiences are just too overwhelming to ignore. I looked at my books and said, there has to be cannabis in here. I've never looked for it, and it was everywhere. They start out with, this is so well known to every good housewife in the country that I shall not need to write a description of it. And then it goes down to tell you, including how to use the roots. And this book is 1805. All of these tabs are references to cannabis and how to use cannabis. We lost this. This is a tool we really need, and we're not too stupid to do it. We're not too stupid to handle this plant.
My father said to me, you know, when I was at the University of Minnesota School of Pharmacy in 1928, one of the assignments we had was to make tincture of cannabis, and we had to be very careful because the alcohol was illegal. And I thought, well, how quaint, you know, but we don't use plants anymore. And it probably took me a good 15 or 20 years to really appreciate that this stuff still was medicine.
It was part of the pharmacopoeia, you know, well into the 20th century. It was a frequently prescribed medication, not to smoke it, but in its tinctures, etc. And if you look at then why and how it was criminalized, really the key factor was the role of racism and xenophobia, anti-Mexican sentiment. People often point their finger at Harry Anslinger, who was the founder, the first head of the Federal Bureau of Narcotics. But in fact, he didn't start off being an anti-marijuana ideologue. It was really as the 30s progressed that he began to see the political opportunity in this. The Marijuana Tax Act of 1937 is basically a prohibition law.
The American Medical Association told Congress in 1937, we sent a representative and said that you should not ban this substance because substantial medical uses and developments will be neglected, and also there's things that we are already using this for that we don't have substitutes for.
Is this a medicine? Cannabis has been a medicine for 3,000 years. It only hasn't been a medicine in this country for 70 years. I think it's a medicine.
It's